Hey guys, Tony here, and I'm back to answer Lazarus's thread on the 80s. And um, the 80s were, I'd have to say, a pretty important time in my life because I was born in '79, and so basically, my first 10 years were the 80s. And when I think back to the 80s, I mean, from what I remember, um, I remember in music especially, but in culture, I mean, there was a lot of corniness going on. You gotta admit. But I am a child of the 80s, although I usually say I'm a child of the 90s, but, you know, I grew up, I guess, in the 90s, really. But, you know, the 80s were my childhood. And I remember a lot of big hair. I remember a lot of fluorescent colors. And, jeez, a lot of corniness on the radio. You guys know what I mean. But I can't deny though that it was an extremely important time in music. So much good music came out of the '80s, and as I think Big Star 1000 said, once you really got past what was on the radio, the hits and things, there was some excellent stuff being made. Um, as my earliest memories really of music. Yeah, there's a lot of radio songs and things like that, and things I just knew. But the first music that I was really into was 80s hair metal. I mean, my older sister was, she had the big hair. She loved, Motley Crue, Poison, all those, and I kind of liked what my sister liked. So I wouldn't call it a serious liking of this music, but what I listened to, I guess, was that for a period. My first real concert was Poison and Tesla, and I won't go into other shows I've seen then. But anyway, so yeah, 80s were an interesting time for sure, and the music that I tend to listen to now from the 80s isn't anything that I listened to then. Well, a few things, but so I'm gonna run through this thread, these albums. I got an album for every year, starting with 1980, and for 2 of the years I have 2 albums, only because there are a couple things that could not be represented here. There were a lot of albums I could have chosen for each year, a lot, surprisingly more than I thought. I went through my Excel spreadsheet and I just hit find all for 1980, 1981, 1982, and so on. And for each year, there were a lot of albums, and I thought I might have trouble with a year or two, but definitely not. So I'll just get started here. For 1980, this is an album I had to pick, mostly because, well, it's a fantastic album. I think a really important album, and one that I had to pick mostly because I'll get into it. So it's Joy Division's Closer, and this is just an all-around, I mean, the whole album is just fantastic. This is the reissue, Rhino reissue, originally put out on Factory Records, released in 1980, and if you don't have this album, go out and get it. I highly recommend it. And I picked it because I'm actually in the middle of reading this book, Touching from a Distance, by Deborah Curtis. So, Ian Curtis's wife, his widow. So, this is the Joy Division's really the last album. In the same year, released in 1980, the same year Ian Curtis committed suicide. And it's a fantastic record. I recommend the book too. This is a pretty beat copy. Somebody let me borrow it, but yeah, cool book. So, Closer. For 1980. For 1981 now, I have 2. So, I can't talk about the 80s without mentioning this guy. And if you hear in the background, definitely, I have to call myself a Michael Jackson fan. You cannot deny the man's greatness. You just can't. Especially those first few albums. Off the Wall, Thriller, Bad. I mean, those are the only albums I have. And if I listen to it, which is never, that's what I'd listen to. But you cannot deny the man's talent, his greatness, and Christ, what an album, huh? So when I think of the 80s, I think of Michael Jackson. I think of those videos, those videos premiering for this, for Bad. Yeah, excellent album. I mean, it just is. You can't deny it. And I think every collection really should have a copy of this. I'm sure there aren't many that don't. So, there you go. And my second pick, an album I had to represent, a band I had to represent, and my favorite album by them, Van Halen's Fair Warning. And actually, I believe, yeah, Eddie Van Halen plays a solo on Beat It. Yeah, Beat It. But yeah, Fair Warning. Excellent, excellent album. Just, you know, it's funny because this album, for some reason, I think it's their best album of 1981, and it sold the worst out of every Van Halen album when it was released. But every song on it is killer. It opens with Mean Streets, just awesome. Is This Love? So This Is Love, Push Comes to Shove, Sinner's Swing, and then you have Unchained. Fantastic. Dirty Movies, Hear About It Later, awesome. Hear About It Later. I mean, you want to listen to Van Halen, listen to Fair Warning. It is so great. So I had to represent Van Halen. I'm not a big fan of Sammy Hagar. I'm just not. So Van Halen, David Lee Roth, that's what I like. Alright, so for, 1983 now, I had to pick The Clash, Combat Rock. And here we have the Clash still really experimenting. So after Sandinista, which, you know, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about that album. There's a lot of great tracks on the Sandinista. But, Sandinista, however you say it. But, if you were to pare down that album into one album, really, which would probably be pretty close to this. Although, I don't know. They're both really out there, but this is still an awesome album. And, I mean, you have The Clash's, like, biggest hits on here. Should I Stay or Should I Go? Rock the Casbah, but you also have Straight to Hell, which is awesome. Ghetto Defendant, which, I don't know if a lot of people know. I mean, Clash fans, I'm sure, know. But Allen Ginsberg, the famous beat poet, he does the spoken word part. Reads a poem, basically, over the song. And it's really cool. I'm a big Ginsberg, Kerouac, Burroughs fan. So, to me, it's really cool to have him on there. And a classic album. This is a sticker still on the original version. Yeah. Anyway. There you go. For 1980, where am I? 1983. I had to pick one of my favorite bands, just awesome, the Wipers. So this is the Wipers, Over the Edge, and not quite as good, I think, as Is This Real, but still a classic album. And the Wipers, basically, they came out of the Northwest. And were a big influence on the Seattle scene. But this, you know, early 80s. Greg Sage, and just fantastic songwriter. Over the Edge, Doomtown. I mean, just really, for the most part, very, like, depressing kind of songs. But brilliant. Messenger, So Young, Romeo. No One Wants an Alien, The Lonely One. Now Is the Time, No Generation Gap, just a very cool record. I recommend checking out the Wipers. A good place to start probably is This Real, but this is fantastic as well, from 1983. And I know Cool Ranch Dressing, they showed this, but I had to show it as well for 1984. One of the greatest bands, The Replacements, and this is probably, I mean, for me, hands down, their best album. But Let It Be, their masterpiece, really. It's just such a fantastic record, from beginning to end, on Twin Tone Records. Every song on it is awesome. I mean, I Will Dare, Favorite Thing, which is one of my favorite Replacement songs. We're Coming Out, awesome. Tommy Gets His Tonsils Out, Androgynous, Black Diamond, so you got a Kiss cover. Unsatisfied, Senior Video, Gary's Got a Boner, 16 Blue, Answering Machine. Classic album, and fantastic. So check this out. So I guess I'm on what, 1985, I think. Yeah, The Smiths, Meat Is Murder. Classic Smith albums, as you guys all know. I mean, killer. The Headmaster Ritual. What She Said, The Joke Ain't Funny, Nowhere Fast. Just classic album. Smiths, Morrissey, fantastic. For this one, I picked this. My other pick probably for this year, 1980. Where am I? 1986. Probably would have been. Oh, actually, no. Never mind. I'm on the wrong year. Spaceman III, The Sound of Confusion. Definitely one of my favorite Spaceman III albums. I've been torn. I got this and The Perfect Prescription around the same time, and I'm still torn on which one I like better. But this is it's fantastic, really. So check Spaceman 3 out. Very drony, neo, psych, just fantastic stuff. A really important band. So there you go. So for 1987, I would have chosen Appetite for Destruction, but I had to pick this instead. Jane's Addiction. This is Triple X Records, on Triple X Records. Officially just titled Jane's Addiction, but it's people refer to it as Triple X Records because it's their only release on that label. So this is really before Nothing Shocking, their first major label release. So I think this is so much better than Nothing Shocking, in my opinion. You open up with Trip Away and then closes with Chip Away. Just two really cool songs. You have My Time. There's an acoustic set on this. My Time, Jane Says. They do a cover of Velvet Underground's Rock and Roll. And then they do Sympathy for the Devil. But also 1%, probably one of the best Jane's songs there is. Also Whores, Pigs and Zen, I Would For You. Just a fantastic record. And this is a mint condition original. Really nice copy. So glad to have this. So, excellent album to represent 1987. So instead of Appetite, I chose Lies for 1988. Really great album. There is some one really offensive song, I guess, but overall the album is fantastic, and it definitely shows a different side of the band. I mean, they have that acoustic side, and then that other side is pretty much live, and it's awesome. You know, Used to Love Her, You're Crazy. You have One in a Million, which is the offensive song in question, but Patience, their radio hit. Mamakin, they do a version of Mamakin on here. Nice Boys, a fantastic record. I don't care, I'm a Guns N' Roses fan. I never really liked the Illusions albums, just never did. But their first two, always loved. And finally for 1989, I had to pick two, I just had to. So I had to have Neil Young represented, so I picked Freedom. So this is kind of considered Neil Young's comeback album, and it is a fantastic record. For sure, one of his best, and definitely one of his best in the 80s. 1989, so he's back on, no, actually, he went back on Reprise Records with This Note's For You, but still, this is him basically, for the most part, doing straight up rock, but there still is a lot of different genre influences going on this still. So it opens with an acoustic version of Rockin' in the Free World, and then this is a song, Crime in the City, which is also, there's a longer version of that song, and it's called 0 to 60, or 60 to 0. Then you have Don't Cry, awesome tune. Hanging on a Limb, El Dorado, The Ways of Love. So there's a lot of acoustic and electric songs on here. Someday, and then you have On Broadway. He does a cover of On Broadway. Wrecking Ball, No More, and Too Far Gone, fantastic. And then it closes with the well-known electric version of Rockin' in the Free World, which really, you know, just kind of foreshadowed what was coming after this, and a fantastic record. And I couldn't also not mention this album here. My beat-up copy, well, it's not beat up, but there is a split, of Bleach, Nirvana's first record on Sub Pop. Again, an important record, really. I mean, you have a lot of the whole underground influence kind of converging onto this poppy rock band. I mean, there's definite. I think in Nirvana, I do think punk band. I know a lot of people probably disagree with that, but especially on Bleach and on Incesticide. So this is my white vinyl version, and the sound quality of this is horrible, horrible. So it's one of the main reasons why I'm not that crazy about colored vinyl. This is probably the worst sounding record. Not so much of the sound quality of the recording, but I think it's just the white vinyl. It just has this surface noise, and it's really terrible. But nonetheless, this is a fantastic record. So I had to show it. Blue, awesome tune. Floyd the Barber, About a Girl, School. I mean, is there a more like euphoric song than School? It's just awesome. Love Buzz, fantastic. Paper Cuts, Negative Creep, Scoff, Swap Meet, Mr. Mustache, Sifting. So this is also one of those albums where it was like, I always liked, when I first got into the album, I always loved the first side better than the second. And then over time you really start to like, I started really liking the second side better than the first. But you guys know what I mean with those kinds of albums. It's just one of those things. So yeah, 1989, Nirvana's first record. Awesome. So there you go, guys. Please leave me some comments. And thanks for watching. Hope everybody's well. Take care.